Hi YouTubers, it's George in the shed, but I'm going to give you an update with regarding my findings with these diesel heaters. Now I've had one fitted in my motorhome. It's been there about 3 years now, and also I've got one in my shed, and the one in the motorhome is a 2 kilowatt and the one in the shed is a 5 kilowatt. And a lot of people say that they're the same, but they're not. The 2 kilowatt ones are vastly smaller than the 5 kilowatt, and they're also dearer. The 2 kilowatt ones are running at about £125, where the 5 kilowatt are under £100. Now then, over the time we've had these diesel heaters, we have had a few small problems, but the one that applies to both of the diesel heaters is the display, and with age the display goes dimmer and it's very difficult to read. So it's something to bear in mind if you're in your motorhome when you've got all your curtains open. It's difficult to read the display, and you see this one here, you can't even really tell if it's on or not. It's not a big problem to me, especially one in the shed, and I'll just switch it on and it's already set, so that's not a problem. Now then, the issues I've had with the heaters excuse me, is silly things. The quality of the clips that go around the exhaust, for example, the Jubilee clips, they corrode very badly, especially underneath the van, and I've replaced them twice now, and it's not a big issue, but if you buy decent ones I think it saves you problems in the future. They just corrode. I think the plating on them is very poor, or it's the fact that they get hot and cold, and you know, with the heater on then heater off, then the salt from the road and one thing or another, if it's getting on the exhaust. That's the only criticism related to the exhaust. They do work loose, and you do need to be able to get at them to tighten them, especially the one directly against the heater itself. I've had that come undone a few times. The hose clips I've fitted, as well as a screwdriver slot on it to tighten them, that you can also use a small spanner, so that makes a difference. Other things, I run both my diesel heaters on paraffin or kerosene. Now the reason why I run them on that is Jane does not like the smell of diesel, and simple as that, and plus the fact heating oil, domestic heating oil, paraffin, kerosene, you can get at 68 pence a litre, whereas diesel is about 112. The fuel pipe lines themselves, the rubbers, I've had them perish. Now I'm not sure if that's caused by the paraffin or whether it would be perished with diesel, but it's 3 years I've had the heaters. I'm into my 3rd year. I'm going to now really move on to some tips relating to the diesel heaters, and I'm going to start by talking about the display. Now the displays, because they're illuminated, they consume power. Even when they're switched off, the display is still illuminated. Now if that's mounted above your bed, it can be a blooming nuisance, you know, when it's really dark, because it's bright. So in the motorhome I've got a little cover that goes over the top to stop it. Although ours have gone dim, they're still annoying at night and they consume power. So what I've done, I fitted an isolation switch on the power feed to the diesel heater. Now you may say, oh well, when you switch it off it's going to lose the settings. The only setting it seems to lose is the clock. The settings for the temperature and everything else, you know, whether it's set to pulses or whether it's set to degrees C, still hold in its memory, and it still seems to hold in its memory the key fob. So when my van goes into storage and we're not using it, rather than it consume power from the batteries, I operate the isolation switch and it disconnects any power it consumes to the diesel heater. Okay, what else can I tell you? Oh yes, some more tips related to the diesel heaters. Now, we got this tank that comes with the diesel heater. Now, one of the things you can do is, if you mount it that way, and this is against the side wall of your motorhome, if you unscrew the cap, go down the scrapyard, find an old car and take off the filler arrangement from the fuel tank that goes on the outside of a car, and then just buy yourself some rubber hose to put on here. It means you can fill this container from the outside of your vehicle because it's shaped like that. You can see it, so that can go on a thick piece of, a larger piece of rubber through the wall to the outside of your motorhome, and you can have another filler cap. And if it's mounted that way, you can also do it that way. So it can go through the left hand side wall of your vehicle when it's mounted that way, or the right hand side of your van, depends how it's mounted. Now then, what I've done on my tank, mine's a smaller tank, I've only got half the size of this, purely and simply it wouldn't fit in my van anywhere. When you start filling it, put a litre of fuel in it, with a marker pen draw a line, put another litre of fuel in it, draw another line, etc. So you know each line is 1 litre, and do it by just filling it up a litre at a time. This will give you an indication of how much fuel you're actually using. It's a very simple thing to do because it's see-through. 1 litre of fuel mark, 2 litres of fuel mark, 3 litres, so they're in 1 litre increments, and then you can just see how much fuel and how much you're consuming. In terms of where to fit your pickup point, now you can mount it in 2 places on these. They're reinforced. There's one there, so you can put it directly at the bottom, or there's one there, you can put it directly at the side. I didn't use any of those. The simple reason is, when this is full of paraffin or diesel, if you need to take the tank off and you've got to disconnect the line, which is at the bottom, you've got to drain the tank, and if this is inside your van, it's quite a job to do it. You've got to block the pipe up, and by the time you've blocked it off, you've got paraffin or diesel running inside your van. So I've made up a pickup pipe which goes in the top of my tank, and it goes from the top to the little bit above the bottom, so if there's any sediment, and it's a piece of old copper brake pipe, but you can buy fittings so you can feed it in the top. And the advantage of this is, as soon as you disconnect the pipe with the rubber bit on from here, the only fuel you've got in the system is what's in the thin pipes, and then you can just lift the tank out with the fuel in and take it. This also helps with filling these tanks. If you've got big wing nuts in here, so you can undo it quickly to take it off your van, with the outlet up here, you can take it to your filling station, fill it up, put it back in your van without actually having to tip the fuel inside the tank. Now then, what can I tell you else about the tanks? Be careful with some of the diesels. Some of the more expensive diesels have got a high percentage of, I don't know, green. They call it green diesel. Problem with that is the green user-friendly diesels, they tend to have a lot of what's called enzymes in, and it's causing a big problem for farmers who use diesel, because the enzymes inside the tank, if kept for a long period of time, will start growing, and they form into, it looks like an octopus. It's got tentacles and it's horrid, absolutely horrid, and it can block your filters. So don't store lots of diesel if you can help it, unless it's the cheap diesel, and I always tend to buy the cheap diesel for my engine of my motorhome. I don't buy the performance stuff, it doesn't like it. What else can I tell you about the diesel? Yes, the outlet on mine used to stick out. It had a swivelling nozzle where the hot air blows out the diesel heater. With a small motorhome, the passageway in the middle between the bedding and the cupboards and things is quite small, and it was one of those things that every time I walked past I'd kick the nozzle off because it stuck out about that much outside the cupboard, and you could swivel it. You can buy flush ones, they're about £5 or £6 each, so they're more expensive. I can't remember what's on here. Oh, this is just the normal outlet on this one, and I've just stuck an old bit of pipe on the end because it don't matter in the shed so much. What else can I tell you about the diesel heaters? Yeah, I would, only a suggestion to people is to try and run the plastic fuel pipe underneath your van rather than inside your van, and also put your pump under your van and your filter under your van rather than inside. So if you need to change any of that, you can do it from underneath. So any spillage while you're doing it of the diesel or the paraffin is not inside your van. Plus, if you imagine these rubber couplings, you've got one that goes from the heater to the plastic pipe, you've got one coupling that goes each end of the filter, you've also got these rubber pipes that go on each end of the pump. So if the filter is underneath your motorhome, if they do perish, any leaks will be outside the van. The same if you've got your outlet here for your tank. So you've got a metal pipe running down here picking the fuel up. The rubber pipe is about that long, and it goes from your pickup pipe to the plastic pipe, which is a very springy, sturdy plastic. So you've got a very small rubber joint here. So if this perishes, air will get into the pipe. You get very little fuel leakage. So if you imagine your little rubber pipe here, and that white plastic pipe will go through a hole in your floor, and all the other rubber fittings are underneath your van, so any leaks will be on the floor. Now then, having the fuel pump under the floor has an advantage. It's less sound unless you've bolted it to a chassis. Now, one thing I have discovered, and it's a very, very, very silly one. With the fuel pumps, they're solenoids, and they go dum, 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 dum. There's no motor in it, it's just a solenoid, and it puts a piston backwards and forwards, so it creates a dum, dum, dum noise. When you purchase the kit, you get a rubber mount for the pump. Now then, it's a really, really silly thing. The rubber mount, when it's cold weather, it's very, very hard. It doesn't deaden the noise. So believe it or not, that pump is quieter in the summer than it is in the winter. And it's because the rubber's softer, it absorbs the sound. But in the winter, underneath your van, if it's cold, that rubber's quite solid, and it lets the thump, 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 thump transfer, so it's louder in the winter than it is in the summer. Crazy, I know. So if you can get a better quality rubber, or not a synthetic rubber or whatever, and replace that mount that goes around the pump. What else can I tell you? I think that's about it. And just remember, you could run it on paraffin. With the paraffin, it's a lot cleaner. I haven't had any sooting up problems. The only last thing I can think of is, oh yes, the silencer itself. I've mounted mine flat like that, horizontal. Oh, sorry, I haven't got one here to show you. Flat like that. On the side, there's a drain hole, and you're supposed to have that drain hole facing downwards, so you don't get a build-up of moisture in your silencer. It runs out that little hole in the side. It's where the crimped edge is. You'll see it if you look at it. So it shouldn't be flat, it should be that way. Now, I've actually mounted mine flat. Simple reason is there's not enough room to mount it any other way on my motorhome. It'd be hitting the ground or hitting something else under the bodywork. Just to say, really chuffed with my diesel heaters, both the one in the shed and the one on the motorhome, and it's been 3 years. I'm going to buy new displays for them, and there's an argument going on next door in the neighbours, so I apologise for the noise. And say, this is a spare tank. I've never used it. I've got one that's top filling in the centre, and it's about 5 litres, I think. So it's only got 2 fixings, and the cap's in the middle, and I've just took off the top. This one in this diesel heater here that's more like what I've got in the van. You can see it's got a tap there, and it's only about that deep. So that's it for the diesel heater. I can't think of anything else to talk about. Oh, I did have one problem in the motorhome with the diesel heater. My fault. I ran out of fuel, and I couldn't remember how to prime the pump. You press 2 buttons. I just couldn't remember when we were on holiday, and I had to disconnect the pipe under the van and then siphon some of the fuel down the pipeline, and then I got it going. But kept on coming up with error 6, I think it was, E6. But that was my fault. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's been useful to you, and please subscribe and like. Thank you.